Then let me pay it with forever, the cowboy said. When she was sold as a bride of debt, the sun hung low over the dusty horizon of Aurora's edge, turning the endless desert plains into a sea of orange and gold. The frontier town of Neon Cross lay ahead, a small cluster of metal and stone buildings, their surfaces lined with flickering neon signs and strange holographic billboards. Hover wagons floated lazily above the dusty streets, carrying goods and people across the rough terrain, the smell of ozone mixed with sand giving the air a strange metallic tang. In a small, crumbling house at the edge of town, Leora sat on the floor, staring at a ledger that seemed impossibly long. Her hands shook slightly, but not from the chill of the evening. The numbers were beyond her family's reach, a mountain of debt that seemed to grow larger every day. Her mother moved silently around the room, wiping the last traces of dust from their modest furniture, while her father paced near the window, muttering under his breath. 27,000 credits, and now the interest is higher, her father said, frustration in his voice. We can never pay this. We don't have the lands, the machines, nothing. Leora's eyes welled up. She had heard this talk many times, but hearing it again, in the golden light of the setting sun, made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. She loved her family dearly, and she knew that the debt was not just numbers. It was chains that threatened to pull them all apart. A soft knock came at the door, almost timid, almost polite. Leora's mother answered it, revealing a man in a crisp uniform with a mechanical badge that glimmered under the neon light. His presence brought a strange chill to the room. "Good evening," the man said smoothly, his voice polished but cold. "I am here on behalf of Baron Veyron. I understand your family has some financial difficulties." Her father's face went pale. We are doing everything we can," he said, his voice cracking. The agent's eyes flicked to Leora. "I'm afraid words will not solve this. The Baron requires payment, and there is another way. Your daughter can be offered as a bride to settle the debt. She would live in comfort under his protection, and the debt would be cleared." The room went silent, except for the faint hum of a hovering wagon outside. Leora felt the words like a weight pressing down on her chest. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight against the unfairness, but no sound came out. Her mother's hand found hers, gripping it tightly, as if to share the unbearable weight. "It's only a solution," her father said softly, avoiding her gaze. "It is the only way we can survive." Leora's mind spun. She had dreamed of adventure, of leaving this small desert world to explore other planets and see the stars, but never like this, never with her freedom handed over as payment. The walls of the room seemed to close in, and for a moment she wished she could disappear entirely. But just as despair began to settle in, a new sound reached her ears, the steady beat of hooves against the ground, a rhythm that seemed impossible in a town of hover wagons. The knocking at the door, the whispered deals, the ledger of endless debt. It all faded for a moment as the sound grew louder. Outside, a man appeared on the edge of the street, riding a glowing steed that hovered slightly above the ground. His long coat flapped in the wind, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded his face from the neon lights. He had a calm, almost gentle air, but there was a strength in his posture that made the agent pause. His cybernetic arm shimmered in the fading sunlight, a subtle glow of energy running along the metallic surface. Silas Kane, the wandering cowboy, had arrived. The agent straightened his posture, glancing nervously at the stranger. You are trespassing. This is private business." Silas tipped his hat, eyes hidden under the shadow of the brim. "I don't mean to interfere, but I couldn't help overhearing. Sounds like a deal that shouldn't be made." Her father's hands shook as he turned to the cowboy. You can't do anything." This is how we survive. It's the only way." Silas dismounted with ease, the ground beneath him glowing faintly where his boots touched. He approached slowly, calmly, his gaze fixed on Leora. "I'm not here to take sides," he said softly. "But sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes people need someone willing to make things right, even if it's only with words or a promise." Leora's eyes widened. For the first time that day, she felt a spark of hope. She didn't know this man, didn't know if she could trust him, but there was something in his presence that felt safe, strong, honest. The agent scoffed, stepping forward. "And who are you to challenge the Baron's orders? You're just a wandering cowboy, a relic from another time." Silas's smile was faint, almost wistful. "Maybe. But sometimes relics have the longest memory of what's right and wrong. And I don't like seeing people treated as if they are numbers on a ledger." He paused, then glanced at Leora. What if, instead of paying with money, we could pay with something else? Something forever, her mother gasped softly. Forever? What do you mean? Silas took a deep breath. I mean this. I can settle the debt. Not with credits, not with goods, but with a promise. I will take responsibility. I will protect her. I will make sure she has freedom, safety, and choice. That's my payment. Forever. The room went silent again. Leora felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever spoken with such courage, such certainty for her sake. The idea of forever was strange and frightening, but the way Silas said it made her believe it could exist. The agent frowned, his authority slipping. You cannot offer such things. The Baron expects payment in proper form. Then let him come and speak to me, Silas interrupted. I'll make him understand. But I won't let her life be sold like a ledger entry. Leora's father shook his head, conflicted. We can't ask this of anyone. This is dangerous. Silas kneeled slightly, meeting Leora's eyes. It's not dangerous if you trust me. I won't fail you. For the first time, Leora smiled, small but genuine. She felt a flutter of hope in her chest, as if a window had opened in the walls that had trapped her all these months. She wanted to ask him questions, so many questions, but the words caught in her throat. Somehow, she knew she didn't need to. His presence said it all. By nightfall, Silas had arranged for them to leave. The agent, frustrated and confused, retreated back to the Baron's estate, leaving the family with heavy hearts but a newfound sense of relief. Leora packed a small satchel with essentials, her fingers brushing over the edge of the ledger one last time. She felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. The world outside was unknown, but for the first time, it didn't feel entirely hostile. Silas waited outside on his glowing steed. The neon lights reflected off his coat, giving him an almost ethereal appearance. Are you ready? He asked, voice calm but filled with purpose. Leora nodded. I think yes. I think I am. Her mother hugged her tightly. Be safe. And remember, freedom is yours now. As they rode out of Neon Cross, the wind catching Leora's hair, she looked back at the small town bathed in neon glow. Her life had changed in a single day. The debt that had once chained her family no longer loomed as a shadow. Ahead, the endless desert stretched, promising adventures, challenges, and, perhaps, a new kind of forever. Silas rode beside her, quiet but vigilant. The stars began to shimmer in the darkening sky, distant planets glowing faintly like lanterns in the night. Leora wondered what awaited her beyond the horizon, but for the first time, she felt ready to meet it. The journey had begun. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a rolling sea of orange sand and distant jagged cliffs. The twin suns of Aurora's Edge were dipping lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and violet. Leora clutched her satchel tightly, feeling the hum of Silas's hovering steed beneath her. The gentle vibration of the energy field around the horse-like machine soothed her nerves more than she expected. Silas rode beside her, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, but she could feel his steady presence. His cybernetic arm glimmered faintly with a blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. It fascinated her, but she knew better than to ask questions too soon. She had learned from the events of the past day that patience often revealed truth faster than insistence. You're quiet, Silas said after a while, his voice calm but curious. Most people in your situation either talk too much or too little. You're somewhere in the middle. Leora smiled faintly, staring at the horizon. I don't know what to say. It's all so fast. One moment I'm trapped in that house, thinking my life is decided by numbers. The next, you show up. And now I'm riding out into the desert with someone I barely know. That's the life of a wanderer. You get used to things changing fast, but you'll find sometimes change isn't so bad. She glanced at him, noting the sincerity in his eyes. How do you know so much about people? About what's right? He shrugged, as if the weight of his past rested lightly on his shoulders. I've made mistakes. I've done things I regret. But I've also learned to see what really matters. Protecting freedom, respecting choice, those are the things I don't regret. They rode in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the steed and the occasional call of desert creatures. Leora noticed the land was not empty. Strange plants glowed faintly under the light of the setting suns, their leaves shimmering in blues and purples. Small hovering insects circled above, leaving streaks of light in their wake. The frontier of Aurora's Edge was alive, a mix of wild nature and futuristic oddities. After a few miles, Silas guided them to a small ridge overlooking a valley. The view took Leora's breath away. Crystalline rocks jutted from the sand, reflecting the colors of the sunset. In the distance, a cluster of abandoned space shuttles leaned against each other, their metal hulls catching the last rays of light. It was silent, peaceful, yet full of stories waiting to be discovered. "This is where we'll camp tonight," Silas said, dismounting smoothly. He motioned for Leora to follow. "It's safe here. The terrain hides us from prying eyes, and there's a spring nearby. Water is scarce in the desert, so always stay aware." Leora jumped down, her boots sinking slightly into the soft sand. "You've traveled these lands a lot, haven't you?" "More than I can count," Silas replied, checking the steed's energy core. "And I've learned that survival isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about understanding it, respecting it, and sometimes making friends with it." He set up a small portable camp device, unfolding the canopy that shimmered in translucent silver. Within minutes, a small area of shade and comfort emerged in the middle of the desert. Leora watched, fascinated by his efficiency. There was a rhythm to his movements, calm and precise, as if he had done this hundreds of times before. Do you always help strangers like this?" she asked softly, settling on a flat rock beside the camp. Silas paused, looking up at the sky. The twin suns were now dipping below the horizon, and the first stars began to sparkle. "Not always. But sometimes, when someone needs a chance to live freely, you take it, even if it means stepping into the unknown." Leora felt her chest tighten. There was courage in his words, but also a gentleness that made her feel safe. "I never thought someone would care about me like that, not really. I thought I was just numbers on a ledger, a solution to someone else's problem." Silas reached out, not touching her, but letting his words bridge the distance. "You're not a solution. You're a person. And people, they're worth more than money, more than debts, always." She looked down at her hands, feeling a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. Could she really trust him? And yet, something deep inside her told her she could. Night fell fully, and the desert transformed. The air grew cooler, and the sky was alive with stars. Distant auroras danced in green and violet streaks, casting an ethereal glow over the crystalline rocks. Leora could hear the soft whispers of desert winds, carrying stories of travelers long gone. Silas handed her a small device. "Here, it's a light generator. Keeps the area illuminated without attracting attention, and it can create a small warmth if the night gets cold." She took it, surprised by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat side by side, watching the sky in comfortable silence. After a while, Leora asked, Why did you offer to pay my debt? You didn't even know me yesterday." Silas paused, his gaze fixed on the stars. "I've seen too many people's lives decided for them by numbers, by promises they never made, by debts they never asked for. I can't fix everything, but I can fix this. And, maybe, in doing so, I find a little piece of the freedom I lost." She looked at him, curiosity mingling with admiration. "You lost your freedom?" He smiled faintly, a shadow of pain in his expression. "Once, I was like the Baron's agents, chasing debts, collecting what wasn't mine. I thought it was right. I thought it was necessary. But I realized freedom is more important than credit, more important than control. And once I saw that, I couldn't go back." The words lingered in the night air, mingling with the soft hum of desert life. Leora felt a connection she couldn't explain. Not just admiration, but understanding, a shared desire for freedom, even in different ways. As the night deepened, Silas pointed toward the horizon. "See those ruins? Space shuttles abandoned after some forgotten mission. They tell stories, if you know how to read them. And sometimes they hide things, tools, maps, or even places to rest safely. The desert isn't empty, Leora. It's full of life, if you look closely." Her eyes widened. You really see everything. The world isn't just sand and dust to you." "Not anymore," he said softly. "And soon it won't just be sand and dust to you either." The next morning, Silas taught her how to ride the hovering steed, adjusting her posture, guiding her hands on the reins. Leora's first attempts were wobbly, but he never scolded her. Instead, he encouraged, laughed softly at small mistakes, and celebrated her small victories. She discovered that riding the steed was not just about movement, but about balance, trust, and rhythm. "You're a quick learner," Silas said, as she finally managed a smooth turn. "Most people take weeks to feel comfortable. You've got a natural sense." Leora blushed. "Maybe I just want to get away from the past. That's as good a reason as any, he said with a faint smile. The days passed in a rhythm of travel, learning, and quiet conversations. They explored the small canyons and glowing plant fields, discovering strange fossils and abandoned tools from old settlers. Leora began to see the desert not as a trap, but as a world full of possibilities, where choices mattered and courage could open new paths. One evening, as they rested by a shimmering spring, Leora asked softly, Do you ever get lonely out here?" Silas thought for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I did, once. But I've learned that loneliness is part of the road, and sometimes it's worth the risk to let someone walk beside you. That is what makes it worth it." Leora's heart fluttered. She felt the truth in his words, the promise of companionship, trust, and respect. She realized that the journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid, not with Silas by her side. And as the twin suns rose the next morning, casting a golden glow over the desert, Leora knew one thing clearly. Her life was no longer a ledger of debts. It was a story waiting to be written, a journey of freedom, choice, and perhaps forever. The frontier stretched before them, endless, mysterious, and full of life. And together, the cowboy and the girl who was once a bride of debt rode into it, ready for whatever adventures awaited. The desert stretched farther than the eye could see, a shimmering sea of gold under the twin suns of Aurora's edge. Each dune reflected the light differently, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move as if alive. Leora and Silas rode quietly, the hum of the hovering steed beneath them the only sound, except for the occasional whisper of desert winds. Leora had grown more confident with each mile. Her hands were steady on the reins, her eyes scanning the horizon for signs of danger or curiosity. She had begun to understand the rhythm of the steed, the subtle tilts and shifts that made riding a desert creature more than just holding on. It was about feeling, sensing, and moving together. Silas rode beside her, silent but watchful. His wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, hiding the faint smile he allowed himself when he saw her improvement. She had learned quickly, not just the mechanics of riding, but also how to survive in this strange and beautiful world. They reached a canyon that cut through the desert like a silver scar. Strange crystalline formations jutted from its walls, glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. The air was cooler here, carrying a soft hum, like the canyon itself was alive. Silas slowed the steed. "This canyon is ancient," he said, his voice low. "People call it the Whispering Hollow. The crystals here aren't just beautiful. They're sensors. They pick up vibrations, energy from the wind, footsteps, even emotions sometimes. Travelers say it whispers warnings if you listen closely." Leora looked around, awe in her eyes. "Emotions?" sometimes Silas said with a faint smile. "It reacts to the world. It tells you to be careful, to slow down, or sometimes to trust your instincts. You'll feel it if you pay attention." They entered the canyon slowly. Leora felt a subtle vibration under her boots and steed, a soft rhythmic pulse that seemed almost musical. She looked up at the glowing crystals, and for a moment she felt connected to something larger than herself, something older than any town or debt or promise. "This is amazing," she whispered. Silas nodded. "It's why I travel. To see wonders like this. To remember that life is bigger than fear, bigger than debt, bigger than control." They continued through the canyon, navigating narrow passages and small rock bridges. Leora stumbled once, but Silas caught her arm gently, steadying her. "Easy," he said. "The canyon teaches patience. Force nothing. Move with it." She nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Every step, every small triumph, made her feel more capable, more alive. By nightfall, they reached a small clearing near a sparkling spring fed by underground aquifers. Silas set up camp, unfolding the silver canopy that shimmered under the starlight. Leora watched him, fascinated by his efficiency. He moved with purpose and calm, as if every action had been practiced 1,000 times. But she knew it was more than skill. It was experience, wisdom, born from mistakes, and survival. They ate a simple meal of dried protein cubes and nutrient bars, washed down with water from the spring. Leora noticed that Silas never seemed rushed, never seemed to take the easy path. Even his eating was measured, thoughtful. "You've traveled a lot," she said softly. "Have you ever felt lonely out here?" Silas looked up at the stars, the twin suns now replaced by the soft glow of distant planets. "I did once," he admitted. But I've learned that loneliness isn't always empty. Sometimes it's a companion, and sometimes it teaches you to value the company you do find. Leora thought about that. She had felt lonely in her family's home, trapped by numbers and debts. But now, riding beside Silas, sharing stories and silence alike, she realized loneliness could be replaced by trust, companionship, and even joy. Over the next few days, their journey became a lesson in survival and discovery. They crossed rocky plateaus where the wind howled like a living thing, and Leora learned to use the plasma lasso Silas carried to secure the steed during gusts. They navigated fields of bioluminescent plants that glowed like tiny stars in the dark, and Leora marveled at the beauty that hid in the harshness of the desert. One afternoon, as they rested by a natural stone formation, Leora asked, "Why did you really help me? You didn't know me before yesterday. Why risk so much?" Silas paused, his gaze distant. "I've seen too many people treated as if their lives are nothing more than a ledger, and I realize sometimes the best way to pay a debt isn't with money, it's with your word, your time, your commitment, and if that means promising forever to someone, then so be it." Leora felt her chest tighten. The word forever had seemed strange, even frightening before, but now she understood. It wasn't just a promise. It was protection, care, and choice all rolled into one. It was freedom. The canyon gave way to rolling dunes, golden and endless. Silas pointed to the horizon. "See those dunes? There's a hidden oasis beyond them. Not many travelers find it. I thought it might be a good place to rest and gather supplies." The ride was long and grueling. The sands shifted unpredictably, and Leora had to focus, matching her movements to the steed's hover patterns. Silas rode beside her, offering quiet encouragement. "Trust the steed. It knows the land better than you do. Feel it move, don't force it." By the time they reached the oasis, night had fallen. The water glimmered under the twin moons, reflecting the silhouettes of palm-like alien trees. Leora slipped off her steed, running her hands through the cool water. She felt alive in a way she had never imagined possible. Silas watched her quietly, a faint smile under his shadowed hat. "See? The desert isn't just harsh. It hides beauty, too, if you're willing to look." She laughed softly, splashing water at him. "I think I'm starting to understand. It's not about avoiding the challenges. It's about finding the moments that make it worth traveling through them." The next morning, they explored the oasis. Silas showed Leora how to gather edible plants and purify water, explaining the science behind each technique in a way that made her feel capable rather than overwhelmed. G began to understand the subtle balance of survival, respecting the land while also using its resources wisely. As they prepared to leave, Leora asked, "Do you ever get scared?" Silas considered her question carefully. "Every journey carries risks, but fear isn't always bad. It reminds you to be careful, to pay attention, to value life. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward, even when you feel it." Leora nodded slowly, thinking of the canyon, the dunes, and the endless desert beyond. She realized that courage wasn't something she had been born with. It was something she could learn. And with Silas beside her, she felt she could face whatever challenges came next. By afternoon, they were riding again, the desert stretching endlessly before them. Leora felt the rhythm of the steed beneath her, the pulse of the land, and the quiet strength of Silas at her side. She knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, storms, harsh terrain, and the unknown, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. Together, they would navigate the frontier, discovering the secrets of Aurora's Edge, the wonders hidden in its deserts, and the strength within themselves. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dunes, Leora realized something profound. Her life was no longer defined by debts, by numbers, or by what others expected of her. Her life was a journey, a story being written with each step, each choice, each ride across the endless frontier. Silas looked at her, his voice soft but certain. "Ready for the next leg of our journey?" Leora smiled, feeling the pulse of freedom in her chest. "I am. Let's see what the desert has to teach us next." The steed lifted off the sand, carrying them forward into the unknown. And in that moment, Leora understood the truth of Silas's promise. Freedom, trust, and companionship were the greatest treasures the frontier had to offer. The journey continued, endless and bright, as the cowboy and the girl once sold as a bride of debt rode together toward new horizons, learning, growing, and discovering the boundless beauty of life on Aurora's Edge. The horizon of Aurora's Edge shimmered in gold and violet as the twin suns rose over the desert. Leora and Silas rode slowly, their steed gliding over the soft sand, leaving faint streaks of light in its wake. The journey had brought them through canyons, dunes, and glowing fields, each mile strengthening their trust and understanding. But today, the air felt different, heavier, charged with a sense of anticipation. "Do you feel it?" Leora asked, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Something is coming." Silas nodded, his hand resting lightly on the reins. "I do. The Baron's agents have tracked us this far. They won't be dangerous in the usual sense, but they want to test us. They want to see if the promise I made means anything." Leora frowned. "Test us?" Silas glanced at her, calm and confident. "Not with violence. They rely on power and fear, but they underestimate the strength of words, of courage, and of community. Today we'll show them that freedom isn't bought or sold, it's earned." In the distance, the cliffs of the Starlight Settlement rose against the sky, a small cluster of buildings perched on the edge of a sparkling canyon. Neon lights flickered, and faint holograms shimmered, advertising goods and services to passing travelers. Silas guided the steed down a hidden path, avoiding the main gates. "This way," he said. "It's safer, and it gives us a chance to speak to the townsfolk before the Baron's agents arrive." Leora's heart pounded. She had never imagined confronting the agents who had once threatened to sell her life. But now, with Silas at her side, she felt courage blossoming. "What do we do?" she asked. "We talk," Silas replied. "We show them that no one can be owned, and no promise of debt can replace choice and respect. Words and truth, they are stronger than fear." As they entered the town square through a narrow back alley, the bustle of the settlement surrounded them. Merchants sold glowing fruits and mechanical gadgets, and children laughed as they chased floating drones. The townsfolk paused, watching the unusual pair, the cowboy with his glowing arm and the girl riding confidently beside him. Silas dismounted first, offering a hand to Leora. She took it, feeling a surge of confidence. Together they approached the main square where the Baron's agents were already waiting. Two men in sleek uniforms stood with stern expressions, their hollow badges flashing, signaling authority and power. "Silas Kane," the taller agent said, his voice formal but slightly tense. "And this is her?" Leora straightened, stepping forward. "Yes, I am Leora, and I am here by my choice." The agent raised an eyebrow. "Your family's debt? You cannot simply refuse the Baron's arrangement." She shook her head. "I am not property. I am a person, and I choose my own life." Silas stepped beside her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "She speaks the truth. No debt, no promise, no law can replace choice. The value of life is not in credits, it is in freedom." The taller agent paused, clearly surprised by her calm confidence in Silas's steady words. Around them, townsfolk began to gather, curious about the confrontation. Murmurs spread, and Leora realized she was not alone. People had come to respect her courage, and they were silently supporting her. The shorter agent stepped forward, trying to assert authority. "The Baron will not accept this. You will return with us, or what?" Leora asked, her voice firm. "Do you think fear will decide my life for me? That words you cannot hear will force me to obey?" A hush fell over the square. Even the vendors paused their work, watching as the girl and the cowboy faced the agents without hesitation. Silas spoke next, his voice calm but powerful. "The Baron's power comes from control, from fear, from the belief that people can be bought. But Aurora's Edge has always belonged to its people, to those who see the beauty in the desert, in the land, and in life itself. No one can take that, no one can buy it, and no one can sell it." The taller agent hesitated, scanning the gathering crowd. He could feel the tide turning. The townsfolk were watching, listening, ready to support freedom over fear. The power of words, courage, and community outweighed his badges and authority. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Perhaps the Baron will reconsider. Perhaps there is more to this than we understood." Leora let out a soft breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Freedom isn't about fighting," she said softly to Silas. "It's about being brave enough to speak, to show others that choice matters." Silas nodded, smiling faintly. "Exactly, you've learned well." The Baron's agents left without another word, clearly frustrated but unable to argue against the truth and the quiet power of the community. Leora's family had nothing to fear now. The debt was settled. Not with money, not with barter, but with courage, honesty, and the promise of forever that Silas had made. As the crowd dispersed, Leora turned to Silas, her eyes bright with gratitude. You really did it. You kept your promise. He shrugged lightly, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I told you, forever isn't about money or ownership. It's about protection, care, and trust. And I keep my word. She smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. Not just from debt, not just from fear, but from the weight of expectations that had tried to decide her life for her. That evening, as the twin moons rose and the desert cooled, Silas and Leora rode to a nearby cliff overlooking the glowing canyon. The light reflected off the crystalline formations, casting shimmering patterns across the rocks. "Do you see that?" Silas asked, pointing toward the horizon. "That's the edge of the world, as most people see it. But beyond it, there are endless possibilities. Planets to explore, wonders to discover, lives to touch. And we get to choose which paths to take." Leora looked out, feeling a sense of wonder and hope. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And we'll face it together, right?" Silas nodded. Together. Always. For the first time, Leora felt the weight of the word forever, not as a burden, but as a promise. Not a chain, but a bond. The cowboy who had appeared like a shadow in her despair had given her more than safety. He had given her a choice, freedom, and companionship that would last a lifetime. They camped that night on the cliff, the wind whispering around them like the soft voices of the desert itself. Silas taught her how to navigate by the stars, how to read the faint glimmers of energy in the canyon, and how to find paths where others saw only obstacles. Leora listened, eager and attentive, absorbing the lessons like a sponge. Over the next few days, they explored hidden valleys, glowing forests, and abandoned settlements. Leora found joy in small victories, catching her first desert fish, mastering the hover steed's tricky maneuvers, and learning to read the land like Silas did. Each step of the journey reminded her of the power of freedom, courage, and trust. By the time they returned to Neon Cross, the town that had once seemed a cage, Leora was not the same girl who had left. She walked with confidence, her head held high, her eyes bright with determination. The townsfolk greeted her warmly, admiring her courage and the stories of the journey she had taken with Silas. Her family embraced her, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. "You're free," her mother whispered. "Truly free." "Yes," Leora replied, smiling at Silas. "And it's because of him, and because I chose to be brave." Silas tipped his hat, smiling faintly. "You didn't need me to fight for you. You needed yourself to believe in your own strength. I just walked beside you." She looked at him, understanding in her heart what the journey had truly taught her, "and I will always remember that. Forever," she said softly. Silas nodded, the faint glow of his cybernetic arm shimmering under the neon lights. "Forever," he echoed, a promise that needed no words to prove its truth. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in gold and violet once more, Leora and Silas mounted their steed, riding toward the horizon. The world ahead was vast, full of wonder, challenge, and beauty, but for the first time Leora knew she could face it, not as a girl sold to debt, but as someone free, someone brave, and someone who had discovered the true meaning of forever. The desert stretched endlessly before them, mysterious and alive, and together, the cowboy and the girl who had once been sold as a bride of debt rode into the unknown, ready for whatever adventures awaited side by side, forever bound by trust, choice, and freedom.